All right, welcome back to the Daily Fantasy Flex Podcast, the PGA edition. I am your host, Bryan. I am joined, as always, by Colin Davey and Peter Jennings, a.k.a. CSU Ram 88, and we are back for the Safeway Open. The FedEx Cup playoffs are over, so I guess we're in like the 2018 PGA season. I'm not exactly sure. I always get confused about how the seasons work. It's not exactly matching up with the years. But anyway, we're at the Safeway Open. And before we really jump into talking about this particular tournament and the players and course, just real quick, if you have not heard, we have some big company news that I'm going to kick to Pete real quick just on, in case you guys haven't heard, and then we'll move on to the tournament. Pete, big acquisition today, definitely exciting. You mind talking about just that for a couple minutes?
Yeah, it's exciting news today. FantasyLabs was acquired by the Chernin Group. We were one of three companies acquired by the group to form the Action Network. We're joined by Sports Insights as well as Sports Action, and really just excited about the opportunity. I think the Chernin Group's obviously done a lot of great stuff in the media space. Most people know them for their acquisition of Barstool, which is blowing up, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's a great opportunity to get aligned with Sports Insights, which is obviously a big part of FantasyLabs now. The co-founders were involved in that company as well, and yeah, just stoked. We have some other big news coming. Colin is going to be a huge part of what we're doing going forward. And yeah, I'm really excited just about the opportunity to get into the full sports speculation space. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity and things are definitely changing. So exciting news, and definitely excited to be part of everything going forward.
Very exciting news. Yeah, if you're thinking that the company growing would be more less Colin, then you're going to be disappointed, because
they have made the mistake of letting me touch everything. My God, there's going to be so much data and everything that we do behind the scenes, every single sport. Yeah, they've really opened the floodgates for me to touch everything. So again, I have pulled off this con somehow. They let me in the back door, but I am very excited to provide so much more stuff, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. But we're going to do some really groundbreaking stuff and kind of continue to be the best in all things sports analytics in service of the engaged fan.
Well said. Yeah, a lot of excitement here. Definitely go check out what Bale said on the site. There's a post that should be up for the next couple of days at the top of the site. So definitely go read that. More information on exactly what you can expect from FantasyLabs and the Action Network, which is the new company with Chad Millman over the next little bit. So very exciting. But let's get into the golf tournament. The Safeway Open, this is a tournament in beautiful Napa, California at the Silverado Country Club. It has been here for 2007, and it was first known as the Fry's Electronics Open, now called the Safeway Open. Usually the field's not too loaded because it's right after the FedEx Cup playoffs, and some of these guys are taking a little bit of a break at the end of the fall season. Brendan Steele won last year, Emiliano Grillo the year before, so it's fairly decent names, and we do have some of those high-end names here. A little bit, Phil Mickelson is in the field, Tony Finau, so some talented guys, but not the high-end guys we're used to for the FedEx Cup playoffs. But interesting tournament nonetheless. Let's hit on the course. Colin, the Silverado Country Club course, it's 72 par. It's playing at just right at 7,200 yards. What sort of players do well here?
So the first little caveat here is we finally have a tournament where it's at a course I've actually played, God forbid. Wow. I want to do a straw poll around the room. Have you guys ever played on any of the PGA Tour courses? Like, that's probably tough for you because it doesn't come to Colorado, but like, you ever, ever played any of the TPCs that they do events at? Or?
Yeah, I've played the Boston TPC course. I actually we were trying to play Silverado on our Napa trip here this last year and couldn't get on. But yeah, it's really cool. You'll have a little course knowledge here, Colin.
Yeah, I hope I'm more not relying on my course knowledge for playing it, because you don't really want anything with my 15 index polluting the data. This one, I'm going to keep it simple. It's 7,200 yards. It's distance. Don't overthink it. Although, that being said, having played the course, the second cut is not that bad. It makes sense that like accuracy, like just from kind of seeing it anecdotally, doesn't seem like it's going to be penalizing a lot. If it's that long distance, that's definitely favored. I think it's reflected in who's favored this week. Keep it simple, go Bombers. Just don't overthink it.
Any objections, Pete?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that it's a spot where you certainly want to go Bombers. Par fives are important, and fortunately we have some guys at the top that I think make a lot of sense. And, I'm excited to get back into the swing of things with golf.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's jump into this. Definitely keep as many minutes as possible to discuss these players. So the top of the salary range, Tony Finau, after being a popular guy over the last couple months, usually in the lower range, the highest priced guy, finally a price bump. He's 11.5 on DraftKings. Webb Simpson, 11.2. Phil Mickelson at 11K. And then Zach Johnson round out the triple-digit players at 10.5. So let's start there. I guess if you're looking to do some stars and scrubs lineup, let's talk about which of those guys stand out the most, who you think might be the chalkiest, or if you think it might be fairly distributed. Pete, you have any thoughts there?
Finau's the guy I like the most. Obviously, we've been on Finau for a while. It's unfortunate to see him be the odds-on favorite and the most expensive golfer, but I think he makes a lot of sense. He certainly fits the mold as a bomber, has the best odds. Phil Mickelson started to play well down the stretch. He's the only guy who I believe was part of the President's Cup here. So I think he's one guy to kind of pay attention to, I guess, as well. But yeah, Finau for me at the top is the guy that I'm most interested in. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, it's interesting to see Finau as at the kind of the top here, especially compared to Mickelson, which like maybe is a little bit different from our normal name recognition. But I have Finau as ahead by quite a good margin. I think he definitely has the best fit here by far, has decent history to boot. I find Webb Simpson really uncompelling just because for some awful history here. It's just way too much a red flag not to ignore. And then Mickelson just hasn't been himself lately. I've also kind of always just been generally bearish on Zach Johnson. He's never played here before. I don't know whether or not I'm always underrating him, but he's coming in low this week, definitely. But yeah, not a whole lot of room at the top. Like, I think Finau's the only one that's actually kind of makes a compelling case to get in there at all. So, like, yeah, it's Finau or bust for me. It really depends on how much value I think I can squeeze into the lower tiers. But all else being equal, it looks like it lends itself to a lot more balanced lineup this week.
Yeah, there's a ton of good guys in the 9K range, and I'm prone to building lineups more around those guys. If I were to spend up, it'd definitely be a Finau for me.
Yeah, I think Phil's at least a little bit intriguing just because of his performance over his last two tournaments. So he has the best recent adjusted round score in the field, and he does have good course history here. Got 8th place last year in his only visit. So, the guy that really stands out as like just oddly priced is Webb Simpson at 11.2 with 2 missed cuts under his belt. I don't really understand why he's that pricey. I know he has like a really good plus minus over the last like couple months on tour, but as far as actually like performance here and even fit, not a great one. So 11.2, I'll probably fade him and probably go more around Finau Mickelson, even though I'm sure that'll be a popular route as well. All right, so let's dip down to that 9K range. So so who stands out to you, Colin, in this 9K range? You know, we do have guys like Keegan Bradley, Lucas Glover, Brendan Steele, Ches Reavie, some of our go-tos right there. And they do have distance and fit moderately well, but do you think they're going to be pretty chalky this week?
I mean, I kind of have a tough time distinguishing between any of the 9K kind of like high 8s, low 9s. I think they're all pretty fairly priced. I think they all have pretty like compelling history. And it's really going to depend on, I think, ownership as far as kind of like the tiebreaker between all of them. I could see someone like Na being like a little bit extra chalky just because of that group. His odds are a little bit like better than anyone else, kind of similarly with Brendan Steele. I could see him being a little bit higher owned. Maybe Love Mark as being like the least chalky by a little bit. Love Mark tends to be high risk, high reward. So if you're going GPPs, I have no problem taking on risk there. But yeah, it's like I have a tough time to. I mean, you can make a case for any of these guys, really. I think it'll all shake out on how ownership is projected out, and like if there's any differentiation, or if you want to grab anyone from anywhere else. But I have a tough time picking between any of them.
Yeah, I like Brendan Steele the most in this range, just in terms of raw equity. Obviously, has really good course history here. You can make a lot of arguments for some of these other guys. Dipping down to the 8K range, the upper 8K range, Peter Uihlein looked really good, won a Web.com event by a large margin. Didn't finish out the last one well, but I think he's definitely talented and makes a lot of sense. Martin Laird, I'm always biased towards him. I think he's a good play, good history here. And then Emiliano Grillo I really like as well, as a guy kind of in that mid-8K range is a nice play.
What are your guys' thoughts on Kevin Na? I mean, just like data-wise, it's hard to fade him. He's hit his salary-based expectations to 7 out of his last 10, each of his last 4. And then course history-wise, I mean, it really just as elite as anybody. It's got 7th place last year and 2nd place the year before in 2015. A 67.4 adjusted round score. So he's not a guy that like we would typically want, especially if we're going to build a model around players that have distance. I mean, his driving distance is not very long. But yeah, so I guess the question is just like, how do you juxtapose his really, really good history and form lately with the distance problem? Is this a guy that you sort of manually adjust exposure to, Colin?
I think it's like you can have cases where history and fit kind of cancel each other out. It's not unheard of that they do. They should go hand in hand, but sometimes they don't, and that doesn't bother me a whole lot. So, like, that should wash itself out naturally in models where if you give weight to course and you give weight to distance, he'll kind of, the chips will fall where they do. And, like, yeah, I could see a case for him, like, on history alone. I think the tiebreaker will be ownership. The one angle we have not covered yet, Bill Haas is in the field. It's a weaker field.
Yeah.
So that narrative took a little bit of a hit last time. I know we're kind of plodding along, but like, Pete, how much of your opinion of that angle changed based on the fact that it didn't come through last time?
I mean, it didn't change dramatically. I mean, these are still the spots I want to target Haas. His price is a little expensive, but might be a little awkward just with ownership too, where he's priced. So I think he could be a really good play. Definitely have no problem with him. I do like some of these guys for value a little bit more in the high 8s to low 9K range, but I do think he's a really intriguing play just given that he's kind of in that weird pricing point in the upper 9s. I do think people will probably click him more than Ryan Moore, but I definitely like Haas better than, like, say, Zach Johnson or something.
Yeah, it's definitely fair. So, Pete, it really looks like some of these guys that are in the lower range, I think you had hinted at this before. I mean, like Glover at 9.1, Keegan at 9.3, Uihlein at 8.8, and then we go down just a little bit to like Luke List at 7.9. We have Harold Varner at 8K. Yeah, like Luke List, Harold Varner at 8K. Like you can really build a nice lineup of 6 guys in that like high 7 to 9K range that you could just load up on some of those guys. It seems to be like the preferred route, especially in cash games. Is that what you're coming around to when you're starting to build lineups?
Yeah, that's what I like. I mean, when the most expensive golfer is Tony Finau, and I do think he's the best golfer here, but you can just tell it's not a huge discrepancy. You don't have any of these studs that are just far better. So I think balance makes a lot of sense. I really like Luke List kind of moving into the 7K range. I think he makes a ton of sense. And then you have to kind of differentiate some of these other guys that aren't really big names. Kokrak has flashed some big upside here at times. Mackenzie Hughes had a couple nice stretches there. But I'm struggling a little bit more in this mid-7K range. If you want to go ball striking, you can look at someone like Graham Dillette, but I don't love him in this spot. Bryson DeChambeau played pretty well down the stretch in the FedEx. I mean, he's interesting at his price. You have someone like Patrick Rogers if you're going to play the distance angle. It's a tough kind of the mid-7s to high 7s is kind of the range I think is going to make or break your teams. The only guy I really love is Luke List. What do you think, Colin?
I think that one of the frustrating things about this field is that there are a lot of new guys in the mid to 7K range. And just like looking up just compiling my list of people on whom I have no data, it's a really long list compared to normal fields. And that's common with these types of tournaments. So that's the reason I'm struggling. It's just like I'm probably missing out on some sort of subjective angle watching some of these rookies come through and if they're worthwhile. The two names that kind of stand out for me as far as early glances, and I know nothing about them so far, are these guys, Andrew Landry and Aaron Wise, who have just enough data to start getting into the system, but like they definitely pop in this range a little bit more. The other guy that's a little bit up there that is kind of surprised to see is Bronson Burgoon, who has kind of like just been on the lower tier forever, but he did pretty well on the Web.com Tour Finals. And so he's starting to get up there as far as like recognition, but this is a range of like a lot of uncertainty and no confidence for me. So I'm willing to take a flyer on maybe a couple more unknown people, hoping that maybe the data sees something in the results that people are just going to pass over. So I'm kind of similarly struggling, but I think like this is the time to go ownership because like maybe do you think everyone else will also be not knowing these people and just not willing to put down a flyer?
For sure. Yeah, no, I think people are going to gravitate to the names that they recognize. So, like, for example, like there's guys in like that you mentioned those guys like Keith Mitchell at 7'6", like a fringe Web.com guy who's played well. They like 7'6", and Grayson Murray is 7'1". Like everyone's going to roster Grayson, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. So, yeah, this may be like I could see the angle being this week of like set your models accordingly. If there's a guy that you've never seen before and you know that no one else has seen, like there's no reason not to take a couple flyers and hope that like it comes out with low ownership. I know name recognition is something that ownership projections don't really price in all that well. They're indirectly reflected in stuff like tout recommendations. But if no one's heard of these people, then yeah, that's like I think that's an angle to take.
Yeah, I do think Grayson Murray is a really good play. His price is going to bring him up given his distance, but he probably will be popular. And yeah, you're getting a lot of guys like Maverick McNealing, who is the #1 amateur, who I definitely think has a lot of upside, certainly could be a really good golfer. I believe he just announced that he's going to be a Callaway guy. So interesting to see that. There's some guys here that'll be fun to watch going into this next season. So I do think that there's some narratives that you can take, but we definitely don't have as much data on some of these new guys. But yeah, there are certain players just from a talent perspective like McNealy that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and do you think that like the name recognition guys, like the Grayson Murray, even like Trey Mullinax, like, was he at 6'7"? Do you think that they're going to be little over-owned than normal just because everyone around them are guys that you like the casual player might not recognize?
Yeah, I like Mullinax a lot. And you get into the 6K range, it is tough. I mean, you have some guys that just have like very little equity, like Colt Nose, who I think is just done. I'll say that, and he'll probably do well. But there's a lot of guys that are just not – there's some pretty bad golfers here relative to what we're used to seeing on the PGA Tour. So I do think there's certain guys to hone in on, but I don't think there's a ton of guys that are just going to be uber chalk down in this 6K range. I guess Mullinax might be somewhat popular, but I imagine these low 7K guys will soak up a lot more ownership.
Mm-hmm. So what's the answer there, Colin? Does adjusted round score do the heavy lifting for us? Just weight it heavy and build some lineups and have some fun?
Yeah, I think that you might want to set a little bit higher rating on field strength this week because you have such a mix of Web.com Tour people that like this is a case where long-term adjusted round may break down. We have a mix of Tour mainstays and Web.com up-and-comers. So I'd rate field strength like a little bit higher to kind of balance it out. But like, yeah, those two in tandem should do your heavy lifting.
And can you just explain real quick for people who might not understand what field strength is as far as like in our models?
So field strength is kind of like an average measure of how the quality of tournaments that the players play in. So someone who's a PGA Tour mainstay will have a pretty high field strength. And someone who like plays in the weaker events like the Euro Tour or even the Web.com Tour, it will be reflected that their fields are comprised of kind of second-tier golfers, so they'll have a low field strength rating. So if someone's racking up killer scores in the Web.com Tour, they're beating their fields, but they are weak fields. And so like Web.com Tour crushers may pass for kind of middling tour players. And so like that's usually the composition of a tour event is like with pretty steady PGA players, but this is one case where it's not. So it requires some adjustment around long-term adjusted round and kind of tempering it with weighting field a little bit higher.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Yeah. I mean, crushing the web.com or crushing any tournament is notable, but it has to be adjusted for sure. Yeah, Pete, before we get to talking winners and stuff like that, is that sort of what you're going to do when you're building your model this week, is just really heavy long-term adjusted round, distance, and field score?
Yeah, I love all those things. That's definitely what I'm going to look at the most. We'll try to find a couple guys that I want to take shots on in tournaments potentially, that, for whatever reason, I just think they might be undervalued here, just given their history in the web.com. I love to find these diamond in the rough guys, but I think that's the most actionable data-driven approach that you can take, which obviously is going to be the most profitable. So I like that approach. And yeah, there's some pretty good spots here, I think, to take advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely going to be some contrarian options. We're used to, at least over the last couple of weeks, some smaller fields at the end of the FedEx Cup playoffs, and we have a large field with a lot of names that we don't recognize. So you're going to definitely have some guys that are 0.1% owned in GPP. So if you want to take some stands, dive into models and really research some of these guys that are coming off the web.com or whatever tour, you could potentially have an edge. And go build some models, because we have these metrics that like a long-term adjusted round and field score that can do the lifting for you. So definitely excited to be back into the PGA Tour season. Is it 2018? Is that are we doing this? Is that what the season is?
I'm not sure exactly when this is. I believe it's starting basically right now, because the FedEx Cup should be the end of the 17th season. So I think we're into the 18th season now.
We're living in the future.
Yeah. I thought that's how it worked at the FedEx Cup, and then it starts to 2018. So, but I just get confused. But
I'm pretty sure that's the way it is too, but not 100% conviction.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Well, let's pick some winners, and then we'll get out of here for sure. Anyone dying to have first pick in Finau, I guess, is the prize.
Yes, I'll take Finau. Yes, I'm dying for Finau. Give me Finau.
All right.
Let him get Finau. Go. Do you want Bryan? You want second or third?
Yeah, you got next.
Okay, I will take Phil Mickelson.
Okay, I'm gonna go Steele, and then let's go under Steele, under 9K. I'm gonna go. I guess equity-wise, Grillo is probably the smart play there.
I'll go Peter Uihlein.
Yeah.
Ches Reavie. If he's open at the last pick, I can't not take him.
All right. I'm great, buddy.
Finau and Reavie. That's the perfect draft for you, Colin.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Very good draft for Colin.
I may just have to go up there this weekend and root for them in person.
I'm sure that would be a tough trip, having to go to Napa. I'd feel bad for you.
Life.
Yeah, so terrible.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate everyone listening. Would appreciate a rate and review on iTunes if you don't mind. That is always very helpful for us. We have the NFL Flex podcast, and Pete was on the Three Donkeys as well. So other shows definitely this week. Recorded an NBA podcast as well, talking Eastern Conference. So appreciate all your support for the Flex podcast. Good luck this week, and we'll talk to you guys soon.